Okay. Can you give me your name and your character's name for the film?
My pleasure. Jeffrey Grover is my name. My character's name is Dennis.
Perfect, Dennis. And can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved with the project of Eyes Upon Waking?
Yeah. A year ago I was in Budapest, and I had a message that came through Jen, from Jen, who I didn't know, from a woman whose name is Heidi Zaro. I don't even know if I could pick Heidi out in the crowd, but somehow she knew Jen and recommended me, and that started a dialogue, and that was the beginning of the exploration. This is well over a year ago, just about a year ago, July.
Perfect. All right. And can you tell us a little bit about your character in the film?
Yeah, Dennis, he's mid-level professional, probably works in banking. He's it's not indicated.
Oh, so you kind of a little free reign with the development.
I talked to the director, Tim, about it, and we felt the thing about Dennis is he thinks before he says something. He's been thinking about, I'll say I have, but we're speaking about Dennis, I'll say he.
Sure.
He's been thinking about suicide since he was 7. He's now in his 50s. And he's, as I say in the film, I only did something about it a week ago. And I think the character, my character, he's I wouldn't say necessarily an introvert. He comes out of his shell as we evolve. We're in a space, obviously, where we're sort of going through past triage into the next step to see if we can actually go back to being, quote, on our own. But Dennis is not a guy I think you'd walk by on the street like many people who want to commit suicide or thinking about it, and you would never really pick that up. So I think he's a guy that may be a little less obvious on the surface. Seems kind of whatever normal is, and I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
But he definitely does something and shoots his eye out, which is why I have this makeup on. Not supposed to look at you, but with your eye.
Sure. Yeah, you have an eye patch in the film.
My eye patch is off. It's hard when your eyes like this and you're used to seeing from 2 eyes. It's weird, but think about that adjustment. I mean, literally, he did something, tried to kill himself, and blew it, and just wound up shooting his eye out, which is kind of funny in a sense, but it's really ironic. And now is trying to figure out what are his next steps. As I think about it in the film, and I know you're cutting this, so I'm just giving you some thoughts.
Sure.
As I thought about the character as we've been working through this the last several days, I realized I'm eating in scenes, I'm joking, I'm thinking about the reality of what I did. My dad sat in this exact area, if you watch the film, hopefully people will, where my father came to visit. And suddenly it occurred to me, these are borrowed moments because I wasn't supposed to be here.
Oh, sure.
And then as the character, and now I'm starting to think I'm glad I am. And finding something and a purpose with these other characters.
Yeah.
So Dennis, I mean, basically he's, I think, a gentleman, but someone who definitely is disconnected from most people. Probably made his bed, made sure his insurance was paid, his finances done. If he had anything to distribute, he managed that. And in the end, wound up awake and was wondering, what did I do? And realized I'm like missing an eye.
Yeah.
It's comical, really, but in some ways, but it's serious stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, is the character of Dennis based on a real life incident that maybe Jen knows or someone from the story? Is that anything you know?
Right. I think I just talked to her dad, actually. It's really cool. She says it's 85% true and 15% fiction.
Oh, okay.
I think this is based on experiences that she had, which is why she wrote it. She's very transparent. It's not autobiographical, but it's based on her own life experience. And while I don't know if there is a, quote, Dennis, maybe his name is Frank,
Sure.
or maybe it's a woman, or whatever.
Yeah.
But my sense is that he's somebody that she met.
Interesting. Now, I notice you have these bands on your arms. Is there anything you want to mentioned about him? Is there a story behind him?
If you dream it, you can do it. My son Jeremy passed away 2 years ago, August 21st. His youngest brother, my youngest son, Brian, had these made up while he was in college. Hundreds of people have these all over the country.
Oh, wonderful.
Because my son, that was something we attribute to Jeremy.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy had a lot of challenges, and he certainly didn't take his life. I mean, it was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
But when people deal with mental illness and they're dealing with challenges, and there's such a stigma associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
People who are really talented sometimes are not clearly understood, and they're fighting it, and it's a private battle.
Mm-hmm.
Even with people who you think your closest loved ones would know. And I bring this on, and I've worn these in 3 or 4 films I've done recently.
Okay.
And I wear them because they're part of me, and I can make them part of the character. And I think you can understand why this would be appropriate for Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
But I find them to be appropriate because they remind me of what a wonderful son I have, and children, family, and particularly the fact that there are just things that sometimes we just have to be more cognizant of. You can't live inside somebody else's life and know what's inside of their thinking. You really have to be aware.
Mm.
And I'd also say one other thing about it, and this isn't specific to Jeremy. I have a dear friend who lost her husband about 12, 13 years ago in Chicago. And she and I knew each other from college, from theater. And we've been friends. And I found out that he had taken his life, and he was bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
And she has gotten involved with an organization called Life Act, originally SPIA, Suicide Prevention Education Alliance, because when she and John were in college, and she's very public about it, and not saying anything out of school,
Sure.
they were that couple.
Mm-hmm.
She was a newscaster, he was a stud, guy, great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Jeff, it's hard to understand. So I think the film resonates personally on a number of levels. And I'm not saying that's necessarily informing my performance, because you can't let your own catharsis do your work for you. I'm not here to be, I don't need therapy. I get therapists outside.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've found in this process and through the script and Jen's openness and transparency and everybody involved, front of camera, back of camera, everybody really wants people to, not about our stories, but think about your own lives. And just always remember to ask the question, if somebody is in a situation where you think they might want to hurt themselves, ask them, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Because sometimes you're going to hear yes. And you can do something about it. And that's a message I'd say I'd like to think is important, as well as the film being optimistic about the fact that people can move forward as best they can, and if you will, be probably in constant recovery.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. That was actually going to be one of my questions, if you had anything you would say to the audience that had seen the movie, that is now seeing this interview, if there's any direct message you would want to relay to anyone.
I would say don't walk away from it and go to dinner and forget about it.
Yeah.
And also, too, I think there's a 5-minute rule when I live in New York, and when I go to see plays. My daughter and I, we have a rule. It's called the 5-minute rule or 10-minute rule. You don't say anything about the play for 5 or 10 minutes afterwards. It's like, God, can you believe how bad that show? No.
Yeah.
You stop,
Uh-huh.
let it settle, and then process it and talk about it. And it may be that this will trigger some things for an audience. Some things that literally, excuse the pun with my character, that might be difficult. And my message to an audience member would be in these kind of things, and there is this kind of theater and film that's done. Been in several projects that deal with various things, including drug addiction and sexual assault, a lot of things. We always tell people it's okay to let your emotions evolved because theater and film enable you to see yourself in other people, acknowledge it, and then do something about it. That would be a really valuable message, and I don't think we're going to know from too many people who see the film if that happens, but I'll bet you there's going to be at least one or
Right.
two. And I hope that it saves a life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I think that's all the questions I think I have. If there's anything that you'd want to close with, in addition to what you've already added so far, I think you've had a lot of great insight that you've added, that you've shared with us today. I don't know if there's any ending.
Other than saying that this is an extraordinary experience, no. I mean, let the theater, let the film speak for itself.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.